trying to talk under this. Our next panel we have for you right now is the Art of Satire. So please welcome me in joining Zakiya Dalila Harris, author of The Other Black Girl, Mateo Askaripour, author of Black Buck, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, author of Friday Black, which will be moderated by Milena Brown, director of marketing at Doubleday. They'll be talking to us about balancing dark humor among serious subjects such as racism, microaggressions, and social justice. So give them a round of applause, everyone. Thanks.
Hello, welcome. We're going to keep the same energy as the publishing panel. So, thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panelists here.
Hello.
Zakiya, the author of The Other Black Girl, which as a marketing person I actually worked on. Mateo, who is the author of Black Buck. Nana Kwame, who is the author of Friday Black. And this actually wasn't planned because afterwards I was like, maybe this should have been the blackest panel alive. Because not only the beautiful people of color and black in your title. The other thing you guys have in common, all three of you here on stage are New York Times bestsellers. And then the other thing you have in common, it's kind of like a satire for all three of your books. So we're going to go with the definition of satire: the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. So the topical issues in all three of your books deal with microaggressions, outright racism, even capitalism, and your use of humor, exaggeration is impactful in it. So how did this develop in your minds? So ladies first, we'll start with Zakiya.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I don't know if this, okay, can everyone hear me? Awesome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for that question. I think for me, I did not go in planning to write a satire. My first thought was two black women, white workplace, how can I play with this? Like, I knew shit was gonna get real. And I didn't know in what way until I decided to really keep it in the publishing world, because I should say I worked in book publishing myself. And so once I knew it was going to stay in that world, I could really play with all of the effed up things about publishing, the publishing industry, and what it's like to be a black person working in that space. And it was really fun, but also I think therapeutic as I thought about, all those times I'm like listening to my bosses talk about their vacation homes and all the things, that the conversations that were happening around publishing that were really keeping us, people of color, out of those conversations without even necessarily thinking about it, I think. And so anyway, all of those things permeated the book as I was going along. So then afterwards to kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, this is kind of satire. It's funny because it is, but I also don't think it is in some ways. Like that was real, I think, in a lot of ways. Not all of it, but a lot of it.
Yeah, for me, like Zakiya, I didn't set out to really write a satire. Black Buck was the third manuscript that I wrote. I wrote two that didn't get on. I didn't get an agent or anything. And by the time I began writing Black Buck, I said, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm just going to go as hard as possible. And I felt as though I received permission in some ways because I had just read Paul Beatty's The Sellout, which is like a farce. It's absurd to the umpteenth degree. And I said, okay, I'm going to write this book as true and as authentic to my experience as possible while not shying away from the absurdity that is ripe in many workplaces. This book, Black Buck, is about a young black man who is the only black person at an all-white New York City tech startup working in sales. If you've ever worked in a corporate setting, if you've ever worked in any form of sales, then you know that the absurdity writes itself. So when I was writing the book, anything that came to my mind, regardless of how even potentially offensive it was at times, right? It had to be justified. I wasn't just looking to provoke, but anything that came to my mind that rang true to my experience and the experience that I believe others have had in these places, I didn't hold back. Now, that meant that I wrote a huge first draft, and I had to cut a lot out, and I had to sharpen it and refine. But that's what I was working towards, and that's how I was moving. But like Zakiya said, I could picture 85-90% of what happens in my book, though it's a novel, though it's fiction, actually happening. And the responses have shown me that so much of that depends on people's reference points, like how much they can actually believe these satirical things actually happening or not. There are people who read my book and say, Mateo, this would never happen, this is absurd, and this is funny in some ways, but definitely not. Then there's been other people who read my book and say that it was extremely hard because it was triggering and it was traumatizing because I have been the only insert person, right? Only black person, only black woman, only person of a certain sexual orientation in the workplace around all these other people who didn't identify as me. And what you wrote in there was funny on the face, but when you probe deeper, not as funny because I lived it and I know how painful that could be. So that's just a long way of saying that the satire in some ways wrote itself, but I was also coming from a place of trying to write something true, even if it wasn't exactly my history one-to-one at all times.
Before I answer, I just want to say I'm so hyped to be here in the Bronx. Yes. You know, I live in the Bronx. And I've had a book for a while. This is one of my first times getting to an event here where I live. So shout out to all the organizers. Like, this is really beautiful for me to see, honestly. But yeah, I think in terms of figuring out satire or getting into that space, when I was sort of figuring out who I was as a writer, I did an MFA program. I spent a lot of time doing like very serious, bad Dennis Johnson impressions or like poor man's Junot Diaz, even though Junot Diaz is kind of funny, or like you know, I was trying to be other people, and the stories were like these people that were brooding, and for some reason the word linoleum appeared randomly, and it was just a serious weird thing. And I was faking because I thought that to be considered a real writer you had to do a certain kind of thing. And I think that what helped me was I was introduced to a Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed by a guy named Arthur Flowers. And I see a fan. And it changed my life because I was like, oh shit, like you're allowed to do this. Yeah. And it's like considered real. And we had to do like a little writing response to that. And what I wrote was like the very first beginning of the first story in my short story collection called The Finkelstein Five. And while it was about a very serious subject, which is the extrajudicial murder of black people, I was able to say in a way that used humor not to make fun of or make light of something, but to really become a sharper sword towards like the sort of heart of our racist society. And it helped me because I could stay with the work more intensely because I was getting depressed. I was in college when Trayvon was murdered, and it was like really, really like sticking with me. And by the time I was writing Finkelstein 5, I couldn't watch these videos anymore. I was starting to get kind of like, my general disposition was getting dark. And so, which wasn't me anyways. Once I read the Ishmael Reed, I was able to allow more of my true self into my work, which is like, I'm not like this like super serious, brooding, look at me, I'm a writer type of guy. I don't take myself too serious. And so, reading Ishmael Reed, also having access to, of course, George Saunders, who's one of my favorite writers, who is also taken seriously and very funny, allowed me to be like, you know what? Using humor is not to say this is not serious. To me, I'm dead serious when I'm being funny. And it's just my way of getting a point across.
I must say, Nana, so there are three things that led me to captured me as a reader of your book. One was the dedication. Yeah. When your mom was like, if you were like, are you bored? How many books have you read?
I know, and it's about to be 2 now.
Exactly.
Yeah, how many books have you read?
And then the second was a Kendrick Lamar quote because it speaks to me. I'm from LA. We'll talk about the album later. And then the third was the Finkelstein 5. Yeah. It was like, well, now I have to read the rest of the book.
Thank you.
The three of you always, like in interviews, you've always said that the reader first was the black reader. Like you wrote your books for black readers. Knowing that publishing is so white, what was your experience in writing this book for someone specific? And then having agents, editors read it, like the acquisition process, was there like was there editors or anyone that came to you like, well, we have to change this, or this doesn't make sense, so you have to elaborate? Zakiya, I know there was one about black hair, where in your book you talked about 4C, but was very adamant about not explaining that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we're kind of like in on the joke.
Mm-hmm.
So explain, either three of you, actually Mateo, let's start with you, of like what was kind of like your experience in making sure that this book was for black readers first?
Yeah, it's funny because I've definitely seen some reviews where it's like readers say, all black writers say that they wrote for black people. And then other people will be like, damn, this is the blackest book I've ever read. Then other people will be like, he didn't write this for us. And I'm like, damn. Like, you know, you can have your own perception, but I know my intentions, right? And when I wrote this book, like I said, I was going hard. I wasn't holding back. I said I wanted this to reflect the reality that so many of us experience. So what did that mean? That meant not writing with a white person or a non-black person in mind, right? Who was it? There was it came out in electrical literature many years ago about writing with a little white person on your shoulder or something like that. And you're like, yo, do you get this? I didn't care about that. And I also understood, right, that this wasn't going to relate to every certain person with some melanin as well, because we all have different experiences, even though I believe that there's overlap and commonalities that you'll be like, okay, I can relate to that. Okay, no, I can't relate to working in a corporate setting with a pig running around, right? But for me, when I was writing the book, I said, okay, I am not going to, translate anything. I am not going to change up any vernacular so that other people could understand it. And there's vernacular in there that people probably don't even use anymore, but my brothers and I use, you know? But when it came time to selling the book, one of my first conversations was with my editor. And she is an editor of color, but she's not black, right? But at no point was she ever like, Mateo, I don't get this black shit. Like, can you tell me what this thing means? At no point. And I felt like that's what she was gonna be on from our first conversation when I asked her. I said, you know, what do you think that we need to hone or change in this? And for her, the focus was really certain relationships and sharpening the characterization of a few different people, like the character of Trey, who have ever read the book. But I felt as though she understood where I was coming from. She understood my vision, and she trusted me, and I trusted her as well. And the only thing I'll say related to the book that people asked for some explanation was basically the title, right? Black Buck. And I got an email one day, like in the middle of this whole process, and they said, you know, Mateo, there's a salesperson at one of our distributors that feels uncomfortable with your title. I found out later, I think it was like a white guy from Washington State. And you said, you know, I feel uncomfortable with this title, Black Buck. Why did you pick this title? And I said, bro, I'm very chill, but we're not changing this title. And I sent them maybe a 500, 600 word thought out email, because it wasn't flippant. I didn't just wake up and say, let me write this book, Black Buck, that, you know, has historical context, that is heavy, and that some people could look at it and then feel weird. No, that wasn't the intention. It was well thought out. And when I sent that, they got back and said, copy, like, it's a wrap. But no, fortunately, there were no real issues, at least related to my publisher, related to putting out this book featuring black characters. And I think that maybe something else that everyone on the panel can attest to is that these days, people want to hear about what's going on in our lives and in our minds. And I mean, you said that all of our books have black in it, right? The joke that I sometimes make, or I made with Zakiya and I once on a panel, is you put black in your title and you become a New York Times bestseller.
Word. For real though, literally. Yeah. In my case, that wasn't even the original. Should I answer it next? Yeah. In my case, it wasn't even the original title of my book, and they changed it. Yeah.
What was it? Wow.
Yeah.
It improved. It was gonna be it was gonna be called How to Sell a Jacket, which was like my thesis in MFA. And Friday Black is a better title. I can admit that now, years later. But I felt some type of way for a long time. But in terms of like, and what you just said is very true. There was a time where I feel like my author name would have had to be like N.K. Adjei. Now they're like, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. They're like, he's African, in case you didn't know. Like they make it like, you know what I'm saying? It's like front loaded because it's like cool now. So what you're saying, I think, is a very, very true point. But in terms of my actual work, I think I got lucky that I'm a little like prideful with some of the stuff that I'm just not willing to like relent on. Again, I went to MFA. I was at Syracuse MFA program. My workshop was entirely white except for myself. And so like I said, I did have that period where I was pretending to be someone else, and part of that was because of the space I was in. I thought like I was trying to be literary, which is like, you know, write like, I don't even know, Grace Paley, who's a great writer, incredible writer, but that's obviously not me. And so I had that period of like faking it. And I learned something from that, but I think that I also was lucky. I had a guy named Art of Satire who happened to be black, and we had a workshop. And, you know, writers are sensitive or whatever, so workshop is often like pretty like tame or whatever. I had a bad workshop with him. And he was like, everyone was like congratulating me about how dope what I wrote was and da-da-da. And then after like 30 minutes of that, he took the manuscript physically, held it in his hand. And I'm so grateful for him for doing this, even though at the time I like really wanted to like fight him. And he was like, he dropped it like this, like boom. And it was the start of a 30-minute like, this is trash. For real. Exposed completely. And I think one thing he said though at the end of it all, after like the 30 minutes of like suffering, was like, but the ending was pristine or whatever. And I remember holding on to that word pristine, like it was like the only like warmth in the world. And I wrote the story called The Lion and the Spider, which is about like, has a Nazi stuff. It has my real life in it. That day I wrote the beginning of that story. And so like, after that I was like, if I'm gonna get killed, I'd rather get killed for being myself. Cause I was getting killed for like this thing that I like was sort of fake. And so I was like, that's never happening again. On the publishing side though, by the time I actually did get like I arrived at myself and I kind of knew what I was doing. And I had gotten like, you know, support from really great writers like George Saunders. I think on some level, like that unrelentingness sort of like hurts you a lot. Because when my book came out, it was before like, what's it called? Get Out came out. And I remember going to the movie theater. We had been in publishing and telling my agent like, yeah, we're about to be on now. Like if this is okay with the public. But at the time, if you think about it, like that first story the conceit involves black people killing white people. You know, I didn't have an auction. I had one editor buy the book. We sent it to like 20-something people. That's why like I always have this sort of like chip on my shoulder still about the whole thing, because I know what it was. It wasn't accepted. It wasn't cool, but I didn't care. I knew who I was by then, and I had kind of like had to like go through the fire for it. And so after you kind of go through that fire for it, you're not going to relent. And it's almost as though like the stars kind of aligned, and then by the time the book actually came out, it was like, oh, this is what we liked anyways. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, wow. That was I love hearing you guys talk. Yeah, I mean, having gone into this, when I started writing the book, I was very aware, obviously, of like the publishing just vibe and like who would be reading it. But my bigger worry was if black people would get it, like because like you were saying, like my main audience was black people. But it's not even just black people. Like I was writing for myself specifically, and as someone who, like as a young person, was called an Oreo. I grew up listening to like soul music and the Temptations, but also like Kenny G and Rod Stewart, like a weird, awkward black girl. And that was my biggest concern, that like black readers would read it and be like, why is she so insecure with her blackness? Like I don't understand. So that was interesting. And then when I went into the publishing part, trying to get an agent, my biggest pushback was the genre element, not necessarily the blackness. So I found that really interesting, of like having this twist of kind of horror sci-fi, whereas I think also that's a whole other conversation about black writers writing genre, right? But yeah, and thankfully I didn't have a lot of pushback with those references, and I'm sure it's because I came after Get Out. Like I feel like everything was primed. I think timing-wise, we're finally moving toward a place where we can write all these different books that are talking about so many different kinds of blackness, and that's what I tried to include even in my book. And I think also I want to speak to the cover of my book. Like I feel like that was one of the moments. I mean, there are a lot of moments, like when I met, obviously, Milena, you were in the meeting, when I first met my publisher. at Simon & Schuster, but the conversations about the cover were really what made me feel like, okay, like I knew we were all on the same team, but like when me and my agent made a list of Black artists, and we're like, we want one of these artists to design our cover. And then they went, and they found Temi Coker, amazing Nigerian porn artist, and found the work that he had, and we were like, can we license it, and blah, blah, blah. And that was just an amazing feeling, because I really wanted young Black people, young readers, to go into the bookstore and see this and be like, oh, this is for me. Like, look at her natural hair. Look at her pick earring. Like, this is me. And I wish I had something like that as a young person, because I don't know. Times have changed a lot for the better, but we still have a long way to go. And I've also gotten, I want to add, feedback from Black people who are like, this isn't me. Like, I've been in book clubs, and I've been like, oh shoot, okay. This is happening. All right, like, why did you end this the way it did? Like, what are you saying about, I mean, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but just like a lot of heated moments. But I love that. Like, if we can be having conversations, all these different kinds of conversations about Black books, and this still means that we're going to keep having more and more diversity within the diaspora, within the Black literature space that we're having. And it's like, I'm hoping this means that we can just have young people also writing more books that are different, wacky, not in the mainstream. And just because people are criticizing them, doesn't mean we should fail. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think the more, just having more of us is going to make such a big difference.
Seriously, I can listen to you guys. I'm just gonna fire off questions all day. But I also wanted to get to audience questions, but I just have one more that's like more publishing specific, because we've had this conversation before during the publishing panel. But all three of your books came out kind of like in the last few years. Yours was 2018, 2020. And so there was like this shift.
They were both 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
There was like this kind of cultural shift in publishing that was happening. You kind of was like right in the beginning or right before it, and then y'all came kind of after it. And so now I wanted to kind of get your impression of like how your book was received when you published it versus do you think after 2020 it would have been kind of perceived differently?
That's such a good question, because also like 2020, obviously like stuff was happening outside of any of the book stuff. I think that I actually got blessed to be just published with a lot of people who are going to be important in the literature space for a long time. I'm talking about Tommy Orange, Nafisa, Thompson Spires, Jamel Brinkley, Ingrid Rojas Concheras. Like, these are all the same. Like, we work on together, and like we kind of like would do events together, and it was like this kind of cool group of writers who, I don't know, I feel like that wave, and people did well, and people kind of saw something and felt something, and we were all like kind of debuts. There's more people I'm forgetting, but that's like some of them.
I mean, I found that wave very inspiring. Like,
It was.
when
I felt like it was a
coming.
thing, you know. I felt like it
Yeah.
was like gang, you know. Like, and the way I even met them is a kind of funny story that maybe I'll tell later on. But like, it was Nafisa and a bunch of and Asia Gable and a bunch of their people. Like, something had happened. They kind of like were like defending me. They were like, that wasn't okay, and this whole thing. It was kind of like they're very like dope to me. And so I feel like it was like kind of that push. It was. I don't think it. So I think that did something. And it also showed, like, you could be a person of color doing maybe weird, speculative, whatever stuff like me. You could be doing, like, whatever people think of traditionally literary short stories like Jamela. You could be doing this humor, Black humor like Nafisa. You could be native and tell these big epic stories like Tommy did. You could do a lot of different things. And I think publishers, like, felt it, just like I think consumers felt it. And then I think also what was happening, like, things like Get Out had been basically, like, again, obviously, we've all always been here, but I think publishing and media in general was like, people of color are fresh right now. You know, like, can we... I remember doing the Hollywood thing, going to the Hollywood meetings, and like every single studio had like a newly formed section of themselves that was like the Get Out section, like create the new Get Out movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And so it was everywhere. And so I think that was happening. And I actually know for a fact people like Alana Mayo became like got to be a head of a studio now. We have a lot in the Hollywood side. We have a bunch of like particularly black women taking like really important positions of leadership. And so I think it was a culmination of a lot of things culturally that made it feel like that. I think in 2020, in 2020 and beyond, I think people like Mateo, Zakiya have kept it going. You know, I think it's kind of been this sort of like, yeah, we're not like the door got like a little bit more open, and like it's like flooding in and keeping this thing happening through a really challenging time. I don't know what it is to put out a book mid-pandemic, and to like have had this success that you guys have had. I remember the first time one of my first times talking to Mateo, I'm like, damn, like I know, well, not the first time, but second or third time after the book had come out, I'm like, this is a challenge, and you were like meeting it really, really well by being creative and growing your own platform and being smart with the Bookstagrammers and a lot of stuff. And so, I don't know. I think it's a lot of stuff culturally, but I think what I see is that the people who 20, and then so it's people like y'all, people like Raven, Leilani, like there's been a lot of people who've just been showing up and keeping the sort of fire going. And I don't know what would have been different, but I know it would have been a challenge that I didn't exactly have to face with the pandemic part.
Should we just riff?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, without a doubt, and Nana knows this, and I've said it before publicly, like, Nana ran so that I could fly. You know, I signed with the publisher that published Nana's book, and I did that because I saw what they had done with Friday Black and how they promoted it. Yeah. And, of course, it's all rooted in what Nana did. Like, if you haven't read Friday Black, I say please read that now. It's not long. You can read it in, like, a day or two. But what Nana did was so different, and I don't know if he would claim that it took courage, but I felt as though it was courageous as I was reading it. But me, you know, peeping game, I saw what HMH, they got bought by HarperCollins, now they're called Mariner, this, that, and the other, right? And I'm not even with them for my second book, but I saw what they did with Nana, so I felt as though they were the right stewards for my book, even though I definitely felt I was walking in there as like the new Nana at times, right? And I said this to him. I was like, damn, bro, like, you did your thing. Now they got me. They're filling the quota. I don't know who's coming next. But they did their thing.
And you did your thing, though.
I appreciate it, man. But I also feel as though it's important to point out that so much of what has gone on in the last couple of years with publishing books by black and brown people, at least from my perspective, has been very reactive from the main publishers rather than being proactive, right? Zakiya, and she could talk more about this, when Zakiya was shopping her book and coming around, American Dirt fiasco had just happened. Yeah. Even though American Dirt, she did like, yo, go look at the New York Times bestseller list. That book was on there for like 34 weeks. Like, she's good,
you know? It might still be on there.
Might still be on there. With me and my book, right, Black is in. And a lot of these publishers, because of 2020 or 2016, I mean, pick a year, 1964, this has been happening, right? They're like, okay, we have this wave. Let's put out these books. Let's give some of them a bag, most of them not, but at least we'll say that we've published these books. And then with those rise to the top, then we'll say that, oh, we published these books, you see? Like, now that this, you know, book won an award or whatever. So I feel as though a lot has been reactive. But it's on us to continue to tell our stories in whatever form possible. And we do have wonderful people. You mentioned Bookstagrammers. We have some great Bookstagrammers here right now. Kelly, Nia, a lot more. Why are you side-eyeing like you're not there? Come on. They're helping to bolster our books. Absolutely. And make reading cool and make reading our books cool, regardless of if the mainstream are reading them or not. So the culture is shifting, and there's so many things that are going on, and now is an exciting time for sure.
Yeah. I have to say I read Friday Black in 2020 when I was like in edits mode or waiting for edits. I can't remember what pass I was in, and like it was a dark time. Like, it was a hard time to be trying to edit a novel, especially because my book deals with, I mean, I think all of our books deal with this, but black people who have to go into this space that's oftentimes white and have to put a smile on and just pretend you're not paying attention. And so I'm like literally living that while I'm trying to write this book, trying to like find my community. But I will say, like, to your point, like, black Bookstagrammers have been amazing. And having not been in that world, like not been a social media person before my book, like that was such a warm place to find just support and find other black books that were happening and coming out. Yeah, I mean, I lost my train of thought. I can't remember what the question was, but
I mean, kind of like that cultural shift in 2020.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I mean, I know that you were shopping your book even before American Dirt, before the
February
pandemic.
2020, I was shopping the book.
So
yes.
I'm sure there was like this shift in thinking of how people were going to perceive your book.
Totally, yeah. And American Dirt was a really big thing because I hadn't even known about what was happening. I was like in my bubble preparing to go out on submission, and then my agent sent me the link, and I was like, oh, okay. She's like, just in case this comes up in meetings. And it was weird, too, to be kind of, I mean, it didn't happen a lot, but I did worry I'd be tied to this and seen as a corrective, and I still feel like that constantly, not like an unhealthy amount, but I am always aware, like, okay, blackness is in. I mean, this is also literally in my book of, like, the ways publishing uses us to fill a quota, to make more money, and so I'm constantly, like, figuring that out and how I feel about it. But I think at the end of the day, like, what matters for me the most is going home and knowing, like, I wrote my truth, like, people are finding it, feeling seen in it, or not, but at least we're, again, the conversations that are happening, I'm hoping this means just more really fun books by Black writers. And also publishing showing up for us. Even if we're not writing, like, I think before it was, like, the really hard, really important, but really like memoirs that are like really sad and gripping, but important, of course, or like, I don't know. I'm trying to think what the like stereotype of like what publishing houses wanted of us.
The immigrant
story,
Yeah.
right?
Push.
And so now though, I do feel like there are a lot of Get Out books, and I think a lot of money is going to those, which is great, but I'm just hoping it just keeps turning. I'm hoping we'll have books that are not only like tied to that, but are tied to other things. And I say this as having Get Out as a comp for my book.
Yeah.
Like,
Same. Also, just for the context, like the American Dirt thing it's a book that people thought was like very appropriative and used sort of Mexican like life and culture and maybe struggle in a way that people felt was disingenuous, I guess.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the author happened to she was Puerto Rican but white presenting, I guess.
Yeah.
I think your grandmother was Puerto Rican, but I could be wrong.
Puerto Rican.
I heard she
it
became
was
Puerto
like
Rican after she wrote the book.
Yeah, it was like her grandmother was like a quarter Puerto Rican.
I feel
and she
bad
used that as an excuse.
I feel bad because I like she used to stay not far from me. I had met her like a little before that book came out, and I was like, in my head I was like, this feels interesting that.
It's interesting.
But anyways, she did super well, and that's why like it's kind of funny.
Got a bag.
Well, the other thing though that's
Huge
important
bag.
to add though about why that was a controversy was because I think the question of like where were the people of color to comment on this? Where are the people of color for this campaign? Because there are other also like problematic campaign things
there's
like
Barbara
But also,
Wire.
it was like it was an Oprah book.
Yeah.
Pick. That's
And
what
it was-
even brought it to like the surface.
There was a
you're like,
lot of chaos around it.
Yeah, a lot of chaos.
A thought that occurred to me is when we were talking about that era, like the group is also. I think that I'm thinking about it because I see a great author, Tiffany D. Jackson, in the crowd. I think the YA group has like really people like Tiffany, people like Jason, people like so many people like Nick Stone. I think they've really like been pushing for us and like in terms of power and equity in these spaces. So shout out to y'all.
Yeah, truly.
I mean, at one point, I thought we were doing a long-form podcast. So I want to give the audience a chance to answer, to give questions. Anyone?
Boom.
Yes.
There's a mic.
Mateo, you specifically mentioned about being proactive.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously it's hard because we have almost thousands of years to be reactive as people of color. But what does being proactive look like now, right? I think that's just my question. Cause I think
From an author's perspective?
From any perspective, so we could bring up other authors and even just this movement so it doesn't become a movement or a fad or anything.
Definitely. I think being proactive is doing things that make progress without it being seen, right? So it's like publishers hiring people that are in these acquisition meetings, these acquisition editors, without it having to be some flashy thing or like, look, we got this new token, right? Like, y'all are happy now, right? We need more black and brown people in these acquisition meetings because no longer is it an editor You could have a black or brown editor who likes a book, and then all of a sudden this book's going to be published. Nah, there are big meetings with multiple people. They both can tell you, working in publishing and having worked in publishing, where they're going to talk about P&L, right? Profit, loss, and all of these things. So I think one way that publishers can be more proactive is continuing to hire these people that have a seat at the table rather than just saying, okay, now we got some black authors, be happy. Or now we have this one person that's an editor, be happy. There needs to be more of us in there behind the scenes. 2, authors need to understand the power that we have, right? When I was coming into this game, there was an author that we all know, and especially Nana and I have interacted with him a lot, who's given us a ton of game, Jason Reynolds. Jason told me, this is before I had an agent, Jason said, Mateo, you need to understand that an agent would be lucky to have your work. And that flipped my whole perspective because I was on some, damn, I want to be on. I want an agent, please. And then when he said that, I said, whoa, I have equity. I have power. And I have leverage. Yeah. And that thinking is what had buoyed me throughout all of these other conversations. So when I'm sitting down with my would-be editor, what do you like about the book? What do you want us to change? And straight up asking her and anyone else who wanted to work with me, what do you not like about the book? Like, I need to know. I want you to be real with me. The third thing I'll say is the way that we market and campaign ourselves. Nana and I have spoken about this at length. Not everyone is built for it, but if you have ideas that you can inject your own flavor into your marketing campaign, because this establishment has their own tried and true ways of making books pop, which don't always work, right? Like, how many people look like us who listen to NPR? I don't know, right? If you can inject your own flavor, do it and figure out how to do it. I mean, I came out with a freestyle video, you know? And I was like, damn, are people going to front on me? Is this going to look stupid, whatever? But it was my own natural, really authentic flavor. Thank you. Cool. And it worked out. So there are so many different things in our disposal, but we can't wait to be told what to do. We just have to do it step by step.
I should add on the publishing end, when I was working on Zakiya's book, as a marketer, I was like, don't worry about this, I got this. Yeah. Y'all don't tell me what to do. just give it to me. And I remember the video was one video. Her trailer video. I just okay, our creative department, who's great, they were gonna do the video, send it back to me, and see what we can do with it. They sent me this video where I was like, is that supposed to be?
Wait, did I see this video?
You did not see this video.
I was like, wait, I might have to see this video.
You did not see. I was like, burn this video, burn it. There was a woman with natural hair looking out a window, and I was like, I was like, absolutely not. This is what we're gonna do. I pieced all of a sudden I'm a creative director, an art director. But I mean, that's what it means to having people in the publishing industry to champion for your book, because I was not about to let them go with this video.
Yeah.
That's beautiful though.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and also the boxes that you did too.
Oh my God,
the natural hair boxes.
Yes.
But that's the thing. You have to be able to think outside the box, like what you're saying. And I also want to add on to what you're saying about Jason Reynolds. I think community is so important. I think, I know I'm trying to do this. Things have been crazy, but I'm trying to meet other authors of color, especially authors whose books haven't come out yet, and supporting them any way I can. And I think those words of wisdom that you're able to get, being transparent about how much you're making for an event appearance, all of those are conversations that if we're in the dark, it's we have no idea. And I think it also is, again, good for people who are coming up.
It's huge. That's what the publishing paid me ended up being. Yeah. It's being being more transparent with each other and the community. It helps so much. But also what Jason did was change the way you think about something.
Yeah.
And I try to do that with the people who are coming up who ask me too. It's besides your book sales, this is what I think about in terms of feeling okay about asking for more money. Your editor and that publishing house, when your book does well and or even is perceived as doing well and does well critically, a huge part of that value is now they're going to use you to acquire books for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, totally.
That's a huge, that's worth so much.
Case in point.
Forever, exactly.
Yeah,
they're going to do that. Think about how much that's worth to them.
Yeah.
So even if Friday Black doesn't become a bestseller, if it wins this award or whatever, now they're saying, oh, I'm the person who did this. And Houghton Mifflin Mariner, I'm not with them either now. They're going to say that forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that is extremely valuable. So anyways, that's just another layer
And
of
they
thing
own us.
Now I try to tell that to like
Don't think
people
about
who are
that too
writers, like, you deserve a lot. Like, and because they're going to use it, like that's, you're part of their career in perpetuity. So you have to like get paid like basically to represent that. That's just a small other thing I've been like trying to changing my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Man.
Oh, we actually a couple more questions. I know you already had that. Did you have a question? You already said the question. Who else had a question?
I have a
Anyone
question.
else?
I have a question if
Anyone
no one has one. I told you I'll have this. It's a tick. All right, Mike, real quick. Now that you guys have had your first books that have done really well, and basically I'm wondering like how your writing practice has shifted or changed, and sort of what is you're sort of excited about writing wise moving forward.
Ooh, that's a good question. You go
The
first, because
show.
you're actually like writing your next book, or you're like done. Like, where are you? Well, sorry.
We
Let's
are
tell
in
everybody this.
process. It's always a process.
Always.
Yeah, for me, what excites me is being able to take new and bigger risks with everything that
Yeah.
I do. With this second book, I'm taking a variety of different risks, which hopefully you all be able to see in a couple of years. But anything that I write, I mean, it has to excite me. It has to challenge me in some way. It has to at least allow me to convey my vision in a way that I think is relevant to the lives that we're all living. So, yeah, it's just like I never want to write anything that doesn't get my heart pumping these days. And it's not like it's easy. And in some ways, it's harder to actually sit down and like do the work because I have to get more voices out of my head. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So many voices. So many, and I had voices before.
Yeah.
So now there's so many more voices. Yeah, I mean, I think same. Like, I think I feel really fortunate because like writing a book really opens up a lot of doors that I had been knocking on for years, like essays, story ideas, like things that nobody really necessarily wanted to read or at the time, or I just wasn't in a place to write them. And so I have like a notes app where I'm like collecting all my random thoughts and like trying to suck every bit of time I have that's free and putting it into that kind of process. And yeah, being able to having space to say yes to things that feel good, like what you're saying too. Like that's such a cool feeling. And like I'm working on the TV adaptation of my book right now, so I'm learning how to write TV, which is crazy, but that's really fun. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. But yeah, just feeling like the world's an oyster, my oyster, an oyster. It's both. It's everything.
But I mean, Nana, you're being very modest.
Yes.
Right?
So you do have a second book on the way or coming.
Yeah,
You
I
signed
do.
your
Just
second
finished
book.
copy edits. He tweeted it out, so it's public.
Come on
He just finished
now.
copy edits.
Don't be shy.
I turned in my second book 2 days ago.
Woo!
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's been like 8 years in the making. I'm very, it's like, I can't believe it. And I also, what you say, every time, I've heard you say that before, and it resonates with me exactly. I feel like I don't feel interested in a project unless it feels like sort of impossible when I'm starting it. And now that the book is done, I'm like, the idea that I had the audacity to even try to start this when I tried to start it is so ridiculous.
Wow.
It's a novel, and it's a bigger book. I never thought I would write a big book, because I'm like, this, don't do that. But yeah, I feel extremely, right now, because I can't work on it, I feel a little stressed out. I'm like manic. I was saying earlier with like the energy, I feel like I'm not comfortable not having a specific writing project to work on actively. I know my third book, but I'm trying not to work on it because I realize it's been since like age, I think 17. I've been actively working on like a writing project. I'm 31 now. I've never not been, and I kind of want to give myself a chance to be okay just being a person. Yeah. A big part of my like transition between like book one and everything now was like trying to changing my personal story of myself. I think too much of my identity hinged on like, I'm gonna fucking make it, or that whole thing, and feeling like I need to do this. And it was a kind of like I was very, very desperate and like kind of clinically obsessed. And I'm sort of trying to like reframe that. I kind of had to tap into the energy like one last time to finish the book, that last book. But I'm hoping that moving forward, I can be a little. I want my life, work, relationship to be a little bit better. And it's hard with writing because I can always be writing, and it's something I love. But especially as it becomes a job, or in this kind of way, I'm trying to like reframe my attachment to the doing of it and not make it so that if I'm not writing well, I think I suck as a human. So like trying to reframe that has been like my like thing I'm trying to work on now.
Yeah, that's so real though. The work-life balance, like it's all just.
It can be really bad.
It's all one thing a lot.
Because everything is material, and I find myself like I'm trying to like experience something beautiful and not like trying to glean it for some literary capacity. Like this is just it. I'm not gonna like have to like write about like the smile of the so and so in the crowd. You know, it's like just be here, and because it's funny because it's a way to be very present, but it's also a way to be nowhere ever.
Yeah.
So you have to like trying to find that balance has been a big deal for me.
We have a schedule to keep, unfortunately. We do have other panels, so this one, unfortunately, has to come to an end. But I want to thank the three of you. These brilliant books. Love them so much. I can read them again over and over again. So thank you so much for the three of you being here. Their books are actually available in the back. They can sign books for you if you like. Thank you for coming. Round of applause.
Thank you guys.
Thank
that was
you.
beautiful. Thank y'all.